Right after Zhang Yi and a few others boarded the train, the special train traveled at high speed through the dark tunnel. Shou Kir and Lu Karen then leaned on Zhang Yi's shoulder and dozed off. As for this trip to Blizzard City, Zhang Yi had no idea how long it would take to reach the legendary headquarters. After traveling for about half an hour, the train suddenly made an abrupt stop. Soon after, a group of oddly shaped individuals surged into the carriage. Each of these people had a fierce look in their eyes, making Zhang Yi remark, only the tough ones could have survived till now in this apocalyptic world. Clearly, these individuals were the apocalyptic rulers from another city who had also emerged from a sea of corpses and blood. Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian quietly thought to themselves, if these guys are tough, then aren't you just like Satan? The special train accelerated once again, and this stop-and-board scenario repeated a total of 9 times. After about 3 hours of travel, the train finally stopped at a brightly lit platform. Everyone knew this must be the capital of splendor. Zhang Yi stood up and said to the group, let's get off the train. The looks in the others' eyes were slightly anxious, as everyone around seemed formidable, especially Zhou Kir and Lu Karen, who didn't dare stray half a step from Zhang Yi. Inside the carriage, some were clad in heavy armor, while others were women dressed uniquely. Everyone eyed each other warily with a cold and cautious gaze. Their eyes crossed and scrutinized each other, filling the platform with a thick murderous aura. Zhang Yi did not engage much in eye contact, but instead slowed his pace and walked by himself. He was well aware that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, and that it was not wise to be too conspicuous in such a place. While hiding his presence, he also keenly observed the surroundings. At that moment, he noticed a group of people staring openly at them. Xiao Honglian whispered from behind, these people are from Days City, and the bald guy is called Sun Jianming. He controls an important port and has had some clashes with people from Morning Dew Base on the sea. Zhang Yi was familiar with Days City, located southwest of Heavenly Sea City. He used to visit there often. Hearing Xiao Honglian's explanation, Zhang Yi casually said, keep walking, don't mind them for now. We'll deal with the Blizzard City matters first. Seeing Zhang Yi's delicate appearance, Sun Jianming thought he was just a pushover and said to someone nearby, it seems like Heavenly Sea City has really been destroyed. We've had clashes with Wei Dinghai on the sea before, but we always had to avoid them. Now that Wei Dinghai is dead, Morning Dew Base is managed by that pretty boy. So, does the entire East Sea belong to me now? Gu Hongdai scoffed at this and sarcastically said, look at their group, they've only brought a few people. Such a prosperous Heavenly Sea City has now become so desolate. What a waste. Another leader, Chen Liangyu, joined in the laughter and said, if that's the case, the resources of Heavenly Sea City might as well be handed over now. At this moment, space user Zhang Yi clearly heard this conversation, yet his eyes showed no emotion. Zhang Yi was unconcerned and chuckled to himself. They really think Heavenly Sea City is unguarded. How ridiculous. When everyone emerged from the subway to the surface, a group of fully armed soldiers came into view. Zhang Yi couldn't help but exclaim, is this the legendary Blizzard City Defense Force, the Swallow Cloud Troop? These soldiers were all tall and muscular, with an extraordinary demeanor. Even some female mutants started coveting their bodies. The Swallow Cloud Troop, simply standing in formation, was enough to intimidate the mutant forces from 12 cities. Just then, a heavy footstep drew everyone's attention. A tall and lean middle-aged man emerged from the crowd, the badge on his shoulder symbolizing his military rank shining brightly. His presence was extremely strong, and 2 words immediately came to Zhang Yi's mind, very strong. Just one look made Zhang Yi sense a dangerous aura, a rare experience for him. It seemed that only during the use of extinction by Bian Junwu or the recently promoted Epsilon Yuan Kongya had he ever felt such a sensation. Zhang Yi immediately thought of the words Bian Junwu had once said to him, River South Domain is full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. There are 6 of us who are team captains of investigation teams like me. The commander of the Swallow Cloud Troop in front of him might very well be stronger than Bian Junwu. After all, Bian Junwu was not in his prime at that time. Thinking this, Zhang Yi silently blended into the crowd, deciding to keep a low profile. Then, the man slowly began to speak. Welcome to Blizzard City. I am Tu Yunlai, the Minister of Combat Operations of River South Domain, and I am here to receive you on behalf of the region. At this point, he slowly raised a finger and said in a stern tone, once you are in Blizzard City, you must follow the rules of Blizzard City. Tuck away that lax style you carry outside. Remember, this is very important for you. In Blizzard City, the rules are absolute. Anyone who violates the rules will face the severest punishment. Tu Yunlia's tone was very rigid, showing no mercy. Although his words were unpleasant to hear, Zhang Yi understood that this was just a way to intimidate everyone. If River South Domain did not take a strong stance to subdue these people, some restless individuals might take the opportunity to disrupt the order in Blizzard City. Tu Yunlai continued, I will arrange for your accommodation tonight. Tomorrow morning, the commander will personally hold a meeting, which everyone must attend on time. Remember, do not cause trouble in Blizzard City. Put away those habits you have from the outside world. After saying this, he turned around and left without regard for the crowd's reaction. Honestly, he was somewhat disappointed inside. If someone had dared to challenge him just now, he could have used the opportunity to instantly take them down and establish his authority in front of everyone. However, since everyone everyone was so restrained, it saved him a lot of trouble. At that moment, a female service staff approached. She bowed with a smile and said, "Hello everyone, I will be in charge of hosting you during your days in Blizzard City. Feel free to ask me any questions you might have. Additionally, I will send the rules of Blizzard City to your communication devices. Please make sure to read them carefully. Blizzard City is under military management. There are many rules, so please be careful not to break them." Zhang Yi smiled and nodded, saying, "Thank you for your efforts." Led by the service staff, the group left the subway and prepared to head to their lodging. At that moment, Zhang Yi couldn't help but ask, "Why have we walked so far without seeing a single ordinary person? Where have they all gone?" The staff member replied, "They are all at work. Everyone has their own designated job. Ordinary people work over 14 hours a day. Only then can we maintain the operation of this city." Hearing this, Zhang Yi exclaimed in shock, "What about the elderly and children who are incapable of working?" The staff member explained with a smile, "Their families need to make extra contributions to compensate for that shortfall. Unless the family can provide enough resources, they do not qualify to live in Blizzard City." This rule left Zhou Qi and Liang Yu looking at each other, speechless for a moment. Led by the service staff, Zhang Yi and his group arrived at a building resembling an apartment complex. There were quite a few fully armed soldiers keeping a strict guard downstairs. Once inside the apartment, they found the interior environment to be quite decent. Each person was assigned a separate room. After entering his room, Zhang Yi went straight to bed to rest. Although he was not really sleepy, lying on the bed, Zhang Yi even thought about seeking out Bailey Changqing to get some information. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. He got up to open it and found Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian standing there, with Lu Karen and Zhou Qi following behind them. As soon as they entered the room, Xiao Honglian said with a worried expression, "The number of people Heavenly Sea City brought this time is the least, with other cities bringing hundreds. Moreover, their number of mutants is clearly greater than ours." Xing Tian also added with concern, "That's true. The way they look at us now, it's like they see us as prey." Xiao Honglian continued, "Heavenly Sea City is one of the most populous and economically developed cities in country Hua. Even in the apocalypse, the strength of Heavenly Sea City still far surpasses most other cities, perhaps only second to Blizzard City. If it weren't for the great battle with Yuan Kongya, those people wouldn't have the right to look at us this way." Indeed, that was the case. Nearly 90% of Heavenly Sea City's mutants had been killed by Yuan Kongya, and the armed forces were almost completely depleted. This news had already spread among other cities' forces. However, Zhang Yi was not worried and said indifferently, "This is Blizzard City. Even if they have designs on us, they wouldn't dare to make a move rashly. Making a move here would bring them no benefits. We must also try to restrain ourselves as much as possible, and absolutely must not act rashly unless necessary. Otherwise, I cannot protect you." Xiao Honglian still expressed concern. "I'm afraid our restraint will be seen by them as cowardice. After all, although a person does not intend to harm the tiger is intent on harming the person." Hearing this, Zhang Yi also became a bit worried and asked, "Do you mean they really dare to make a move on us?" Xiao Honglian analyzed seriously. "After all, Heavenly Sea City is the foremost metropolis in country Hua, and in terms of resources, we have much more than they do. Once they notice our strength has declined, it's hard to say they won't covet what we have." Zhang Yi calmly told everyone, "This issue is not something we need to consider now. For now, we should focus all our energy on tomorrow's meeting. Other matters can wait until we return." Seeing Zhang Yi say this, everyone naturally had no objections. Nowadays, everything in Heavenly Sea City was directed by Zhang Yi, and should there be any conflict, it would ultimately depend on him to resolve it. After they left, Zhang Yi realized that Xiao Honglian and the others were indeed frightened by the strict atmosphere of Blizzard City today. At this moment, Zhou Qi and Lu Karen were gazing at him with eager eyes, seemingly seeking a sense of security. Zhang Yi smiled and said, "You two can stay here with me tonight. I'm going out to meet an old friend." After saying that, he picked up the phone and called Bailey Changqing. After Bailey Changqing answered, he said, "Your apartment is in Zone B, and we're right across in Zone A. I'll send you a temporary electronic pass. Let's meet at the password bar." After hanging up the phone, Zhang Yi realized that Zhou Qi and Lu Karen had already sat down on the bed. Zhou Qi smiled and said, "Lu Karen and I will wait here for you. Go ahead." Without saying much, Zhang Yi left the room and walked towards the outside of the apartment building. Just as Zhang Yi was about to leave the floor, a service staff member stopped him, warning, "The curfew is at midnight. I don't recommend you go out now. There are patrol teams all over the city right now. It could cause unnecessary trouble." But these words did not intimidate Zhang Yi. He said displeasedly to the service staff, "The rules did not mention not leaving the apartment. I will definitely follow the regulations of Blizzard City. Moreover, we are guests here, not your subordinates or prisoners." After saying that, he disregarded the service staff's displeased expression and walked straight past her. Once outside the building, Zhang Yi noticed that there were already many footprints on the ground. He couldn't help thinking, "It seems that I'm not the only one going out tonight. How exciting can a nightlife be after the apocalypse?" Meanwhile, in the Blizzard City commander's office, Zhu Jing was sitting in his chair with the Minister of Combat Operations, Tu Yunlai, standing in front of him. After listening to Tu Yunlai's report, Zhu Jing frowned and said, All 13 cities should be in place by now, but only 12 are here. Why hasn't Coastal City shown up? Have their mutants arrived? Tu Yunlai replied in a deep voice. According to the train conductor's records, no one appeared at the platform when the special train stopped at Coastal City. Xu Jing subconsciously clenched his fist, his brow furrowed, pondering. He said solemnly, according to intelligence, the strength of Coastal City's mutants is not strong. They are unlikely to dare oppose the region. But he sharply sensed something odd about this. Coastal City is a coastal city adjacent to Heavenly Sea City, and it shouldn't be having this kind of issue. Yet, Coastal City's urban scale is quite inferior. Could it be that some accident occurred, preventing them from assembling? It is known that they also have 6 sizable power organizations. Whether individually or combined, none have the strength to defy the River South Domain. Xu Jing pondered for a moment and then said, continue trying to contact them and see if you can get through. Tu Yunlai immediately said, I'll send someone to investigate. If we find out they deliberately disobeyed orders, then we'll just eliminate them. Xu Jing looked at Tu Yunlai and slowly nodded, saying, do as you said. At this time, Xu Jing couldn't help but worry internally. I hope nothing goes wrong in Coastal City. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi arrived in zone of following Bailey Changqing's directions. Using the electronic pass sent by Bailey Changqing, Zhang Yi smoothly passed through the high security system of the wall and entered Zone A. As soon as he entered, he was stunned by the sight before him. This place looked like a bustling urban area from before the apocalypse. There were not only colorful fluorescent lights, but also many recreational facilities. At this moment, Zhang Yi truly believed what Bian Junwo had once told him. Blizzard City really has streets as bustling as those before the apocalypse, complete with a vibrant sense of life. However, Zhang Yi also understood that such beauty was only for the few. Following the arrangement, he arrived at the password bar mentioned by Bailey Changqing. There were several high-spec military vehicles parked outside the bar, indicating it was a place like a veterans club. Just as he was about to enter, a guard stopped him. Zhang Yi didn't say much, just picked up his phone and called Bailey Changqing. After confirming his identity, the guard's attitude immediately became respectful. He bowed and said to Zhang Yi, sorry, sir, I didn't know you were a friend of our distinguished guest. Please come in. This made Zhang Yi realize that Bailey Changqing's status in Blizzard City was indeed not low. No wonder he was so eager for the position of captain back then. As soon as he walked into the bar, a bunny girl greeted him and politely said, are you Mr. Zhang Yi? Captain Bailey asked me to bring you over. Zhang Yi could feel the restless and chaotic atmosphere in the bar, but the bunny girl told him, we're going to the VIP lounge upstairs. Zhang Yi couldn't help but exclaim, the hierarchy is indeed strict. Soon, the elevator reached the 13th floor. Zhang Yi thought he would see Bailey Changqing's familiar broad face, but to his surprise, when he stepped out of the elevator, he entered a huge and empty room. The room had a long sofa on which sat a man with silver long hair, handsome and somewhat ethereal. He was holding a glass of red wine, smiling and looking gentlemanly at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, puzzled, thought, could it be that I took the wrong path? Just then, the elevator doors had already automatically closed. Zhang Yi started to panic and hurriedly said, sorry, it seems the staff member led me the wrong way. I'm leaving now. However, the man slowly spoke up. You're in the right place. I had her bring you here. Zhang Yi said warily, we don't know each other, do we? But the man seemed unconcerned and continued on his own. You're called Zhang Yi, right? Someone who Bailey Changqing personally meets must not be a simple character. At this point, he put down his glass of red wine and continued, as for Captain Bailey Changqing, well, I don't really approve of him. However, I've heard a bit about your affairs. Zhang Yi's expression became serious. He doesn't regard Bailey Changqing highly. It seems this person has quite the background. Moreover, he dares to bypass Bailey Changqing and bring me here directly. Could he know some secrets? Zhang Yi tentatively asked. Who might you be? The man in front of him was dressed flamboyantly, and if he hadn't spoken, it might have been difficult to even determine his gender. He said with a confident and playful expression, you must have heard of my legend, right? My name is Deng Shintong. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but show a speechless expression. He really didn't understand where this man's confidence came from, as if knowing his name was a matter of course. With no other choice, Zhang Yi could only awkwardly smile and said perfunctorily, I've heard a great deal about you. This obviously perfunctory response caused Deng Shintong's expression to change, and he said sharply, you haven't heard of my name? Zhang Yi did not want to waste words with this person, being brought here without permission, which delayed his meeting with Bailey Changqing, and now being subjected to this man's self-importance was truly displeasing. He responded coldly, I am not from Blizzard City, so what's so strange about not having heard of your great name? Moreover, I have an appointment with a friend, so I will not be staying. After saying this, Zhang Yi turned around to leave. As he spoke, Zhang Yi turned and pressed the elevator button, but the next second, a hand suddenly landed on his shoulder. Zhang Yi instinctively counterattacked with a chop of his hand, but it was easily blocked by the other party. Don't be nervous. I just wanted to see what kind of person Bailey Changqing's guest is. Zhang Yi turned around and got a clear look at Deng Shintong's face, only to be surprised to find another person on the sofa who looked exactly the same. Could they be twins? Or is he also a space ability user? Just then, the two figures in the room suddenly multiplied into more than a dozen clones, and Zhang Yi could not discern the opponent's abilities, becoming even more cautious. Deng Shintong's voice echoed throughout the room, as if a dozen people were speaking at once. I heard you're a space ability user. Could you demonstrate your abilities? My team is in need of someone like that. If your abilities are decent, I might consider letting you become a substitute on my Heavenly God squad. By now, Zhang Yi was getting angry. This guy had maintained a superior attitude from the beginning, speaking arrogantly and completely disregarding his feelings. Zhang Yi's eyes began to emit a blue glow, thinking to himself, at this distance, letting you see my divine power isn't out of the question. He had never expected that this flamboyant man might have greater strength than him. Just as Zhang Yi was about to unleash divine power, the elevator door behind him suddenly opened. Bailey Changqing rushed out of the elevator with an anxious look, shouting, "How did you end up here? Zhang Yi, come upstairs with me. I've been waiting to have a drink with you on the 18th floor." Bailey Changqing smiled and wrapped an arm around Zhang Yi. Seeing that Bailey Changqing had arrived, Deng Shintong's eyes showed a hint of disappointment, and he said lightly, "Bailey Changqing, I found your friend quite interesting and just wanted to chat with him a bit. You don't mind, do you?" Bailey Changqing scratched his head naively and said, "Captain Deng showing interest in my friend is quite an honor for him, but you should have at least let me know first, right? We're all captains of investigation teams. At the very least some respect is due." After hearing this, Deng Shintong chuckled, his smile carrying a hint of scorn. "If Bian Zhengwu said that to me, I might consider giving him some face. But your abilities, they seem hardly sufficient." Faced with Deng Shintong's direct taunt, Bailey Changqing immediately retorted angrily, "Deng Shintong, are you trying to escalate things?" Deng Shintong appeared displeased. "Back when I was the deputy captain, Bailey Changqing would never dare speak to me with this tone. But now that they were theoretically equals, if a conflict really broke out and the higher-ups blamed them, it wouldn't end well. Moreover, he was just interested in Zhang Yi's abilities, thinking they could be useful for his Heavenly God squad to handle some tasks. He didn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble over this." Thinking this, Deng Shintong waved his hand and said, forget it. Consider me nosy. You might not realize what an opportunity you just missed. Our Heavenly God squad is the strongest in the River South domain." After saying this, Deng Shintong once again created a dozen clones and then vanished on the spot. At that moment, Bailey Changqing finally breathed a sigh of relief and said to Zhang Yi, "Sorry about that, Zhang Yi, to have you face this kind of situation right after arriving." Zhang Yi looked back and smiled, saying, "No worries, it was nothing serious. It was also an opportunity to meet a captain-level figure." With that, the two of them walked into the elevator. In the elevator, Bailey Changqing told Zhang Yi that person was the captain of one of the 6 major investigation teams, the Heavenly God Squad. He's very powerful, but also very arrogant. He comes from the Deng family in the capital of Splendor, a super-rich second generation with both talent and background. Zhang Yi didn't really care. He could tell Deng Shintong meant no harm, but his condescending attitude was annoying. "By the way, tell me about the 6 major investigation teams. Just in case I run into them later, it's good to be prepared and avoid offending anyone unintentionally." Bailey Changqing didn't hold back and started introducing them to Zhang Yi, not treating him as an outsider. The 6 major investigation teams were personally established by Commander Zhu Zhen. They are Heavenly God, Demon, Iron-Blooded, Black Robe, Rose, and Reincarnation. Each team has its own unique style. Our Black Robe team wears all black combat suits, while the Heavenly God Squad wears silver combat uniforms, which are the pinnacle of the Deng family's high-tech achievements. The Rose Squad is most distinctive because all its members are female. He paused, then continued. However, currently in Blizzard City, only the Black Robe and Heavenly God Squads are present. The other 4 teams are out on missions. Zhang Yi nodded, now having a basic understanding of the 6 major investigation teams. It was evident that the River South Domain's affairs were very busy, otherwise there wouldn't be 4 investigation teams out on missions even when there was a major meeting at headquarters. But perhaps in their view, having 2 teams stationed here was already enough. At this moment, Zhang Yi curiously asked, "That Deng Shintong just now, how does he compare to Bian Zhengwu in strength?" Bailey Changqing answered seriously, "Deng Shintong's talent is very high, but this is largely due to the support of the Deng Corporation behind him. The Deng Corporation's foundation is formidable, involved in multiple high-tech sectors including biotechnology. Under the full cultivation of the Deng Corporation, his strength indeed surpasses Captain Bian. Moreover, Deng Shintong's abilities do not suffer from the side effects that afflict Bian's extinction." Hearing this, Zhang Yi shuddered inwardly. "I've seen how strong Bian's extinction can be. Deng Shintong is even stronger than Bian Zhengwu. His strength must also be above mine. It's good that I didn't act rashly earlier, or it could have been dangerous." Thinking this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Deng Shintong is so powerful, it's better to avoid provoking him in the future. However, Bailey Changqing continued to speak. "Although his strength may be above that of Captain Bian, when it comes to combat experience, Captain Bian is streets ahead of him." Zhang Yi nodded in agreement. Powerful individual abilities are only part of it. The key is whether you can fully utilize them. Then, he curiously looked at Bailey Changqing and asked, "Do you know what his abilities specifically are?" Bailey Changqing glanced at Zhang Yi and said helplessly, "Why do you ask?" Even if you knew, I'd advise you better not to compete with him. Zhang Yi waved his hands and said, no, I won't. I'm just curious. I was quite confused by his antics just now, and I'm a bit worried he might target me in the future. Bailey Changqing laughed and said, don't worry about that. After all, he has no grudges against you, and he is the captain of the Heavenly God Squad. As long as you're not an enemy of the River South domain, he has no reason to target you. He paused, then added, as for what type of abilities he has, I'm not too clear either. After all, there's hardly any opportunity for him to personally take action within the entire River South domain. At this point, Bailey Changqing showed a hint of concern, self-deprecatingly saying, I indeed have a considerable gap between Captain Bian and Deng Shintong. I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on to the position of captain of the Black Robe team. Zhang Yi's mouth twitched with an almost imperceptible smile, thinking to himself, it seems Bailey Changqing really doesn't know about Deng Shintong's specific abilities. However, Zhang Yi had realized something, that multiple shadow ability is not real cloning but an illusion. The image of him sitting on the sofa from the start was fake. As a space ability user, Zhang Yi is highly sensitive to spatial fluctuations, so he knew that Deng Shintong's real body was hidden in a corner of the room. He let Deng Shintong touch his shoulder merely to conceal his own strength, but his ability is indeed deadly. If used correctly, it can kill invisibly. However, if you were to face a space ability user like me, the outcome might not be so clear. Before long, they reached the 7th floor. Through the windows of the floor, they could clearly see the chaotic and fun-filled atmosphere inside the bar. In the center of the stage, several scantily clad women were dancing energetically. Zhang Yi and Bailey Changqing found a quiet private room and sat down. Zhang Yi said with a smile, it really has a lively atmosphere, doesn't it? Bailey Changqing joked, if you like it here, it's not too late to start now. Zhang Yi casually replied, if I really like this atmosphere, I could easily create it back in Heavenly Sea City in minutes. Bailey Changqing scratched his head helplessly and said, right, you're now practically the emperor of Heavenly Sea City. Such things wouldn't be a problem for you. He passed over the menu, but Zhang Yi declined. No need, I don't drink. Drinking leads to mistakes, especially when I'm away from home. It's even more inconvenient. Then, Zhang Yi got straight to the point and asked, what is the commander trying to do by suddenly calling everyone together? To be honest, I wasn't very keen on coming to Blizzard City. After a moment of thought, Bailey Changqing said, well, this matter is somewhat related to Captain Bian's death. In fact, it's the first time since the apocalypse that a captain-level mutant has died. The headquarters is worried that more top-level mutants will be sacrificed in the future, which would weaken the overall strength of the River South domain. On one hand, the commander wants to consolidate forces from various places to reduce casualties among mutants during missions. On the other hand, it also facilitates management and prevents internal strife. Zhang Yi had naturally considered what Bailey Changqing said, but what concerned him most was something else. He asked, if someone refuses to be managed, would you force them into service? Bailey Changqing was silent for a while, seemingly weighing his words. He finally said, absorbing strong forces from surrounding areas has always been something the region does. Every resident of Blizzard City is subject to a last-place elimination system, and those who don't contribute enough are expelled from Blizzard City. That's why Captain Bian was so desperate to do missions. It was all to protect his family. Zhang Yi picked up a glass of water, took a sip, and said, so, this big recruitment by the River South domain is likely to select some powerful mutants to join the investigation teams, right? Bailey Changqing shook his head and said, that's hard to say. However, for a powerful mutant like you, if discovered by the higher-ups, they would surely do everything to keep you. If you refuse, it would be like opposing the region. They might think that your existence is no longer necessary. Hearing this, Zhang Yi, facing Bailey Changqing's teasing, smiled and said, if I really came to Blizzard City, the matter of killing Yuan Konya probably couldn't be hidden, right? Upon hearing this, Bailey Changqing instantly fell silent, feeling as if his little secret had been caught, which made him somewhat uncomfortable. If Zhang Yi's true strength is exposed, then it would be difficult to explain to Zhu Zhen. Bailey Changqing's face suddenly became embarrassed. He hurriedly said, but don't worry, I told the commander that you lack a sense of community and loyalty, so even though you're strong, the commander isn't interested in you. After all, the most important thing about joining the region is loyalty. Zhang Yi responded somewhat awkwardly, then I really have to thank you for your misguided praise. At that moment, a waiter came over and said respectfully, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Wu Di is looking for you. Hearing this name, Zhang Yi's brow furrowed slightly. Wu Di had always harbored an inexplicable hostility towards him, so naturally, Zhang Yi did not like this person. However, Bailey Changqing didn't mind and said, members of our squad often come here to relax. After all, we are constantly on the edge of life and death, and when we have some free time, we come here to have a few drinks. Zhang Yi simply stated, I don't want to see him. Only then did Bailey Changqing realize the friction between Wu Di and Zhang Yi, and said, however, now that I'm the captain of the Black Robe Squad, to avoid creating rifts between you and my team members, I must clarify this matter myself. Zhang Yi tilted his head, waiting for his explanation. Bailey Changqing, with a trace of reminiscence in his eyes, slowly said, actually, Wu Di isn't originally from Blizzard City. He was found by Bian Junwood during a mission. promotion. At that time, he was just an ordinary corporate employee struggling on the brink of death during the apocalypse, and it was Bien Junwoo who saved him. During that incident, he unexpectedly awakened his abilities. Since then, Woo Di has always followed Bien Junwoo. In Woo Di's eyes, Bien Junwoo is like a father figure. His hostility towards you isn't personal, but directed at anyone who might replace Captain Bien. Bailey Changqing paused, then added, new members usually join on the basis that old members have left. So, when Captain Bien showed his appreciation for you, it also meant he knew he didn't have much longer to live. And Woo Di couldn't accept that. In his view, as long as Captain Bien didn't find a suitable newcomer, he wouldn't die. This was a kind of paranoia in Woo Di's heart. After hearing this, Zhang Yi felt it was utterly absurd, thinking, this truly is an undeserved disaster. Bailey Changqing decided to use this opportunity to try and clear up their misunderstanding. He said, I think you should talk to him. He's actually a very nice guy, just a bit single-minded sometimes. As soon as he finished speaking, Woo Di burst in, shouting, Zhang Yi, I knew you'd definitely come to find Captain Bailey. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Zhang Yi immediately sensed that the atmosphere was off and stood up quickly. Bailey Changqing hurriedly stopped Woo Di, saying, Little Woo, what are you doing? Don't you understand that Captain Bien's death has little to do with Zhang Yi? Moreover, without him, all of us would probably have died in Heavenly Sea City a long time ago. Zhang Yi's eyes were filled with caution, as Woo Di's posture suggested he might make a move at any moment. Woo Di glared furiously at Zhang Yi and shouted, who said the captain's death has nothing to do with him? If it weren't for him encouraging the captain to use frost essence, the captain could have lived a few more months. At least he could have returned to properly say goodbye to his wife and child, to enjoy the last beautiful moments, and that happiness was stolen by you, you scum. Zhang Yi listened to these accusations and, not wanting to argue further, stood up from the sofa, ready to turn around and go back to his apartment to rest. But Woo Di was relentless, blocking his way and angrily said, today, I won't let you get away so easily. Zhang Yi's expression gradually turned cold, and his tone carried a hint of displeasure. Are you preparing to fight me? Woo Di stared coldly at Zhang Yi and said, I know the decision to use frost essence was the boss's, but I just can't swallow this anger. So, I want you to fight me. Zhang Yi laughed, thinking to himself, he really is a passionate hothead. It seems he won't be satisfied without a fight. He shook his head lightly and said, then don't blame me for using you as practice, but if we're going to fight, there should be some stakes. If I win, I want a top quality weapon. After all, with the advanced technology of the River South domain, getting some high-end equipment shouldn't be hard for you, right? Zhang Yi had deeper plans in mind. He brought Liu Karen to Blizzard City and couldn't go back empty-handed. This was a good opportunity to grab some nice gear. Hearing this, Woo Di sneered and said, just a weapon, no big deal. But really, for mutants like us, the significance of a weapon isn't that great, is it? Bailey Changqing, however, was speechless. He thought to himself, Woo Di really doesn't need weapons for his abilities, so he has no concept of their importance. But weapons are highly confidential in Blizzard City and absolutely not allowed to be leaked. Bailey Changqing quickly stepped forward, anxiously trying to stop them, saying, don't be rash, you too. A simple spar is fine, but make sure it's just a touch and go. Don't escalate it too much, and definitely don't let it turn into a serious fight. As for the stakes, Zhang Yi, you can choose a cold weapon you like, but forget about any firearms. Zhang Yi was somewhat speechless, thinking to himself, cold weapons are useless to me, as I'm best with firearms. I've barely used cold weapons, not even the treasured sword Dragon's Roar, which is usually wielded by Liang Yu in major battles. Noticing the odd look on Zhang Yi's face, Bailey Changqing quickly said cheerfully, don't worry, we won't trick you with junk. Our Black Robe Squad's arsenal also contains plenty of treasures, such as weapons made from Edmund metal. Zhang Yi was familiar with Edmund metal, as the Dragon's Roar was made from this material. Thinking about this, he said, actually, I am quite interested in knives. At that moment, Bailey Changqing pressed a device on his wrist, and a holographic screen instantly appeared in front of Zhang Yi. He pointed at the screen and said, the weapons we usually use are made from Edmund metal. Take a look and see if there's anything you like. Don't even mention any stakes. I'll just give you one. In fact, the cold weapons of the Black Robe Squad were mostly needed by Bailey Changqing alone. He was being so generous because he felt Woo Di couldn't possibly win and decided to favor Zhang Yi as a goodwill gesture. However, Zhang Yi waved his hand and said indifferently, no need. Since we agreed on stakes, I'll earn it with my ability. After finishing his words, he started browsing on the holographic screen. Soon, he had his eyes on a long sword. This sword was only about 1 meter in length, much shorter than the Dragon's Roar, but it looked more lightweight. It would be perfect for close-range defense. After confirming his choice, Bailey Changqing still couldn't help but advise, your sparring must be controlled. Don't go overboard. I will intervene if necessary. At this point, Woo Di confidently said, don't worry, Captain. I know what I'm doing. I'll just subdue him, not endanger his life. Zhang Yi listened, even wanting to laugh, and said, I feel the same. But where shall we fight? Bailey Changqing, seeing the two men tense and ready, knew this fight was inevitable. He helplessly said, we have a training arena in Blizzard City that is specifically designed for combat training, where fighting is legally permitted. Let's go there. The arena's space had a futuristic, dreamlike quality. The interior interior structures appeared to be made of a dark silver metallic material, and it seemed the defense level was much higher than that of Zhang Yi's shelter. Zhang Yi thought, why not bring Lu Karen along to see if he can analyze what rare materials they are using. He smiled at Bailey Changqing and said, can I invite my friend over? Bailey Changqing was somewhat surprised and asked, do you still not trust us? Zhang Yi waved his hand, explaining, I'm just afraid of getting injured. Having a personal doctor there means if something happens, I can be treated right away. Bailey Changqing laughed and said, we have specialized doctors here. Don't worry, they're just around the corner. And do you really think you have a high chance of getting injured fighting Wu Di? Zhang Yi smiled meaningfully and said, I only accept treatment from my own doctor. After thinking it over for a while, Bailey Changqing probably understood Zhang Yi's intentions. Since it was just to watch, it wouldn't hurt, so he casually said, then let your friend come along. Zhang Yi immediately called Zhou Kir and asked the entire team to come over. Of course, his real motive was still to have Lu Karen analyze the materials here, which could later be used to strengthen his shelter. Bailey Changqing also sent them electronic passes. Zhang Yi then teasingly asked Wu Di, do you want to warm up first? Wu Di confidently said, I hope you can give it your all later. Zhang Yi chuckled inwardly, if I really gave it my all, would you still dare to challenge me here? Soon, they arrived at the arena. Zhang Yi briefly explained to Zhou Kir and the others that he was going to duel with Wu Di. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. What level? To dare challenge my brother Zhang? Are you in a hurry to meet Bian Junwu or something? Zhang Yi then revealed his real intention. This guy isn't really foolish. He knows I wouldn't dare to reveal my true strength in Blizzard City. That's why he's boldly challenging me. Outside Blizzard City, 10 Wu Di wouldn't be enough to match me. Lu Karen immediately said angrily, he looks so innocent. I didn't expect him to be so despicable. Uncle, you asked, puzzled, what's the point of doing this? Even if he wins against you when you're not at full strength, what honor is there in that? The specific reasons were unknown to them, but Zhang Yi had some guesses. Perhaps he just wants to prove that he's stronger than the me before the Battle of Heavenly Sea City. This is probably his obsession. However, this was somewhat challenging for Zhang Yi. After all, both sides were well aware of each other's abilities, and winning against Wu Di without revealing his strength wasn't an easy task. At that moment, Zhang Yi looked at Lu Karen and said, I called you guys over mainly because of you. Lu Karen thought he was just there to watch, but was excited to find out he had a mission. He nodded eagerly and said, brother Zhang Yi, just give your orders. Zhang Yi glanced around and said to Lu Karen, Karen, it's rare to get inside the combat center. Take this opportunity to get familiar with the various materials here. You know what I mean? Lu Karen immediately understood and saluted as if in the military, mission guaranteed. By then, Wu Di had already changed into his high-tech battle suit. Bailey Changqing, frowning and full of concern, said, Wu Di, Zhang Yi even held off Epsilon's Yuan Konya. Do you think you stand a chance against him? Isn't this just humiliating yourself? But Wu Di confidently said, don't worry, Captain. During the battle with Yuan Konya, I was able to fully grasp his abilities. His strength is more defensive. Moreover, Yuan Konya's defeat was due to her lack of real combat experience, and I've already thought of a surefire way to beat him. As he spoke, Wu Di pointed to his head and a smug smile appeared on his lips, saying, when Captain Bian was alive, he always told me, being powerful doesn't mean everything. The key is here. At the very least, I need to beat him this time, or I'll never be content in this lifetime. Bailey Changqing sighed helplessly. He knew that what Wu Di cared most about was earning Bian Junwu's approval, even though Bian Junwu was already dead. Defeating Zhang Yi, who Bian Junwu had high hopes for, would greatly satisfy him. More importantly, Wu Di was sure that Zhang Yi wouldn't dare to use his full strength in Blizzard City. However, Bailey Changqing also thought Wu Di's analysis made some sense. Fighting someone like Zhang Yi, who has cheat-like defensive abilities, isn't too dangerous as long as you don't foolishly exhaust yourself. Of course, that's assuming Zhang Yi doesn't use his terrifying divine power. Thinking this, Bailey Changqing turned around to find Zhang Yi, saying, come on, change into the suit. This specially designed combat suit can greatly protect your body. Seeing how cool Wu Di looked in his battle suit, Zhang Yi followed Bailey Changqing to the changing room. Bailey Changqing, using his access rights, pulled out a training suit for Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi took the suit and cautiously checked it to see if there were any special devices. The suit was significantly heavier and thicker than normal fabric, and the touch felt very unique, obviously crafted from some high-tech material. If I put on this suit, my personal data will definitely be recorded, Zhang Yi thought to himself. However, he wasn't a strength-enhanced mutant, so collecting his physical data wouldn't have much reference value. Soon, Zhang Yi had put on the training suit. Then, Zhang Yi pressed a button on his right wrist, and the suit automatically sealed tightly around him. After it was fitted, Zhang Yi was stunned. He could clearly feel his strength and agility had greatly increased. This is incredible. He quickly asked Bailey Changqing why the suit was so special. Bailey Changqing laughed and explained, this training suit is made from the same material as our combat suits, which can enhance the wearer's overall capabilities. To put it bluntly, even a normal person wearing this suit could reach the basic level of an alpha-grade enhanced mutant. Zhang Yi was incredulous, thinking, the technology of the River South domain is so advanced. Bailey Changqing, seeing his reaction, smiled warmly and said, This training suit is very precious. In Blizzard City, only members of the Swallow Cloud Troop and the 6 major investigation teams are qualified to use it. If you like it, you might consider joining our Black Robe Squad. Zhang Yi smirked and replied, I think I'll pass. I prefer the freedom of staying in Heavenly Sea City. Let's head out to the arena now. At this time, Wu Di was already waiting in the arena. As Zhang Yi entered, Bailey Changqing kept admonishing, Brother Zhang Yi, please be merciful. Remember to stop at a point. Before the battle started, Zhang Yi suddenly said to Bailey Changqing, I'll hand over my satellite phone to my companion. There are indeed many secrets in the satellite phone. Hearing this, Bailey Changqing was somewhat speechless and said, do you still not trust us? You really are cautious. Zhang Yi smiled and walked over to Lu Karen, handing over the satellite phone, and simultaneously gave Lu Karen a covert wink. Lu Karen instantly understood and touched Zhang Yi's arm on the training suit. Zhang Yi pretended to chat for a bit, giving Lu Karen ample time to analyze. Soon, Zhang Yi proceeded along the corridor to the center of the arena, while Bailey Changqing, along with a few others, went to the second floor to watch the match. Zhang Yi stood a few tens of meters away from Wu Di and frowned, saying, this place is so small, I feel a bit cramped. Wu Di, with his hands in his pockets, said nonchalantly, you don't have to worry about that. As Wu Di snapped his fingers, the arena seemed to expand several times over. Wu Di, who had just been a dozen meters away, was suddenly 100 meters away. Zhang Yi was slightly stunned, surprised internally. Is this a spatial ability? This is the first time I've seen a spatial ability other than my own. At this moment, Shokir on the second floor also suddenly exclaimed, how is this possible? How did the arena suddenly get bigger? Bailey Changqing explained, rather than saying the scene got bigger, it's more accurate to say that everything in front of us has been shrunk. This is the ability of the arena administrator. Its name is Arena, a very functional spatial ability. Aside from Shokir and others, there were actually many spectators on site. After all, the use of the arena is very high level. Only the 6 major investigation teams and the Swallow Cloud Troop are qualified to apply. Such a high-level battle is rare, so when the arena is applied for, it naturally attracts many spectators. For instance, Deng Shintong and his team members, who had arrived on the 3rd floor of the arena, were watching Zhang Yi with interest, thinking, if he really can defeat Wu Di, then I'll offer him a spot as a substitute on the Heavenly God Squad. Meanwhile, in a box on the 5th floor of the arena, the commander of the River South Domain, Zhu Zheng, had also arrived at the scene. In the box, various electronic screens allowed a 360-degree view of the duel without any blind spots. The Minister of Combat Operations, Tu Yunlai, was sitting on a sofa to the right of Zhu Zheng. It's no exaggeration to say that at least half of the big shots still in Blizzard City had shown up. At that moment, a mechanical, emotionless voice sounded, combat, begin. Zhang Yi was the first to act, lifting 2 specially modified pistols designed by Lu Karen, aiming directly at Wu Di and pulling the trigger. He did not use the Holy Silver bullets modified from Origin Bullet, since using Holy Silver bullets in Blizzard City would make it obvious that they were derived from Origin Bullet. Zhang Yi wouldn't make such a basic mistake. However, even regular armor-piercing bullets, with the enhancement of Zhang Yi's abilities, still possessed formidable lethality. Yet, the power of Wu Di's floating cannon was also formidable. When the bullets approached the floating cannon, they were instantly melted in midair. Wu Di's talent was exceptionally high, and even Deng Shintong, watching the battle, nodded approvingly at this scene, thinking, this kid seems to have gotten stronger. Zhang Yi remained undeterred, thinking to himself, let's see whether your mental power or my bullets run out first. He did not stop firing, trying to deplete Wu Di's mental energy through continuous attacks. Wu Di extended his right hand forward, and several light orbs quickly condensed into a massive floating cannon, which he fiercely fired at Zhang Yi, sneering, thinking these bullets could hurt me? That's utterly fanciful. In an instant, a blue beam pierced through space, arriving in front of Zhang Yi in a flash. Zhang Yi remained calm, immediately opening a huge dimensional gate in front of him. The massive energy ball was instantly absorbed into it. Seeing this, Deng Shintong on the viewing platform slightly changed his expression, inwardly surprised. He can absorb attacks into an alternate space. I always thought his alternate space was just a mobile storage. I didn't realize it had this function. I wonder if my attacks could be handled by him. A burly man with a big beard laughed. Space abilities usually don't have powerful offensive capabilities. I'd be quite interested in sparring with him. A soft-spoken man smirked and mocked. You're a close combat space ability user. Fighting him would just be outright bullying, wouldn't it? In his view, fighting someone from outside Blizzard City was indeed a bit of bullying. After all, he was the vice captain of the Heavenly God Squad, God Fist Liao Honglei. Deng Shintong watched the ongoing battle and felt it a bit dull, mumbling to himself. However, I only need his ability to store items. That way, our squad would have an easier time on missions. If he could also give me a little shock with his space abilities, that would be even more interesting. The attacks from both sides continued, each trying to force the other into exposing a vulnerability through relentless offense. Wu Di knew well that Zhang Yi's most powerful weapon was divine power, but he also knew that divine power required a spatial distortion before it could be unleashed, a clear pre-action tell. Moreover, divine power was extremely draining on abilities, and after using it, Zhang Yi's body would enter a temporary state of power depletion, unable to use it again for a short period. As long as I can dodge divine power or wait until he's reloading, that'll be my chance to strike back, Wu Di analyzed to himself. Just then, as Zhang Yi's pistols ran out of bullets, Wu Di seized the opportunity, and a mass of floating cannons quickly formed. Now, thousands of floating cannons fired simultaneously, attacking Zhang Yi from all directions in a 360-degree assault. With a look of assured victory, Wu Di sneered. Captain Bian once said your abilities could counter my floating cannons, but how will you handle this kind of omnidirectional assault? Zhang Yi immediately understood Wu Di's intention. He's planning a ranged attack on me. Faced with this type of assault, Zhang Yi was momentarily at a loss. The next second, he was engulfed in a series of explosions. Thousands of floating cannons exploded around Zhang Yi, the 360-degree attack leaving him no place to hide. Wu Di's expression grew even more confident, seemingly certain of his victory. This kind of area attack with floating cannons indeed had the potential to harm Zhang Yi. From the stands, Liang Yu couldn't help but say, this guy really came prepared. This kind of attack, coupled with extensive area damage, Zhang Yi's spatial abilities were indeed difficult to defend effectively against such an extensive range attack. Uncle Yu anxiously said, Zhang Yi's physical strength isn't very high. Even the explosive power of these mini floating cannons might injure him. Beside them, Deng Shintong was even somewhat disappointed, sneering, turns out he's just a rookie, beaten just like that. But the next second, Zhang Yi's figure reappeared not far away. Before Wu Di could react, Zhang Yi had already raised his pistols and resumed firing, while taunting, your new move is somewhat clever, but to me, it's just child's play. Soon, the field was once again a battleground of consumption between floating cannons and ability-enhanced bullets. Deng Shintong's eyes brightened slightly, thinking to himself, this ability to traverse through space, whether for offense or defense, is extremely useful. Next to him, Liao Honglei coldly remarked, from what I see, he only knows how to flee. This type of ability is indeed powerful in a post-apocalyptic world, but if that's all he has, he's still not qualified to be a member of our investigation team. Meanwhile, in the box on the 4th floor, Zhu Jing watched the battle with great interest. He analyzed to himself, this ability must connect to an alternate dimension, whether it's absorbing attacks or traveling through it. It requires the alternate space as a medium. Zhu Jing quickly recognized the unique aspects of Zhang Yi's abilities. At this moment, Zhu Zheng's bodyguard, Sun Luxuan, couldn't help but lean in and say, Commander, I feel that this Zhang Yi is always holding back. He's definitely hiding a more powerful move. Hearing this, Zhu Jing was somewhat surprised. This guard, named Sun Luxuan, is also among the top in Blizzard City in terms of strength. Zhu Jing is well aware of just how strong Sun Luxuan really is. Normally, Sun Luxuan seldom actively comments on a battle. However, he now spoke up. Commander, this Zhang Yi is quite interesting. Zhu Jing asked curiously, how so? Sun Luxuan, intently watching Zhang Yi on the screen, slowly said, it's an intuition. Zhang Yi's demeanor in battle is too relaxed. This isn't arrogance or underestimation of the enemy, but rather a confidence that comes from being fully prepared. If he weren't truly powerful, he wouldn't be able to show such an expression against Wu Di's type of attack. Hearing this, Zhu Jing and Lan Xingqing both focused intently on Zhang Yi's expressionless face. His calm and indifference were like that of a top-level gamer playing against a computer. Zhu Jing smiled slightly, quietly enjoying the match, thinking to himself, I knew it. This kid isn't simple. His way of fighting is quite interesting. His alternate space contains an endless supply of weapons and ammunition, meaning he himself is like a massive armory. That's perfect for a war of attrition. After all, even the strongest mutants will run out of energy at some point. At the same time, Wu Di also realized this. If I lose because of this, I'll have lost all face. A core member of the Black Robe Squad, worn down by 2 pistols. If that gets out, I'll be the laughingstock of Blizzard City. Just then, Wu Di leaped into the air with a bound, sneering, sorry, but all this is within my calculations. Zhang Yi was somewhat puzzled, thinking, although we're both relying on ranged attacks, what's the point of him increasing the distance now? Doesn't he know that I can change the distance between us at will? Yet, Zhang Yi was not in a hurry. At this moment, Wu Di rapidly increased the distance between them to about 800 meters. He suddenly spread his arms wide, and countless blue light points appeared around him. Zhang Yi, try this move of mine. If you can withstand it, I'll acknowledge your strength surpasses mine. This move is specially tailored for you, called Floating Cannon Phantom. 300,000 mini floating cannons, exploding continuously for 2 minutes. How will you handle this? The floating cannons released by Wu Di formed a massive spherical cloud, spanning over 800 meters in radius, far exceeding Zhang Yi's dimensional gate travel distance. Moreover, these mini floating cannons would explode continuously for 3 minutes, meaning even if Zhang Yi tried to escape into an alternate space, he could at most avoid it for only 1 minute. In other words, this move was unavoidable. Everyone was fixedly watching the scene unfold. Even for observers like Deng Shintong and Bailey Changqing, this kind of move seemed nearly impossible to dodge. One could only endure it with a strong physique. However, Zhang Yi was not a strength-enhanced advanced mutant, and although his training suit could protect his body, enduring it directly would still be considered a defeat. Wu Di's intent was not to injure Zhang Yi, making him lose face would be enough. Seeing this move, Lian Yu's expression suddenly changed, and he said in a low voice, "This move is completely tailor-made for Zhang Yi." After 3 minutes of explosions, Wu Di stood in place, confident of his victory. He awaited the arena system's judgment, convinced that Zhang Yi had lost, but as the dust settled, everyone was stunned. Zhang Yi was standing there, completely unharmed. Deng Shintong excitedly stood up and laughed. "This guy is interesting. It seems he's much stronger than the information in the district records." Zhu Zheng's face also showed a shocked expression, muttering, "How did he do that? With his dimensional gate, it shouldn't be possible to defend so perfectly." At that moment, Sun Luxuan behind him spoke up. "I think I see what happened. His defensive skills are indeed very special, probably close to absolute defense." He paused, then continued analyzing. During the explosion, he activated a perfect defense wall around himself, absorbing all the attacks. Hearing this, Zhu Jing immediately ordered the arena to analyze the recent battle scene. Soon, the arena displayed a three-dimensional image. In the footage, as the 300,000 floating cannons began exploding, Zhang Yi suddenly activated a spherical dimensional barrier around himself, perfectly blocking all attacks. Seeing this, Zhu Jing remarked, slightly astonished, "Isn't that an absolute defense?" Sun Luxuan smiled slightly and said, "There is no such thing as absolute defense in this world. If there is, it only means that the attacking power isn't strong enough." Lan Xinchen, however, frowned and spoke with a hint of dissatisfaction, quirkily saying, "From beginning to end, he only used various methods to defend. That's too cautious." At this moment, Wu Di, clenching his teeth in disbelief, said, "How is this possible? I've studied your abilities so thoroughly. How could you block that move?" He became somewhat enraged, appearing ready to repeat his previous tactics. Zhang Yi, looking disdainfully at Wu Di, thought to himself, "Don't waste your efforts." If this had been a month ago, Wu Di's move would have certainly put Zhang Yi in a tight spot. But after absorbing the essence of Yuan Kongya, Zhang Yi's abilities had gradually evolved. He was now using a spherical dimensional barrier. No matter how Wu Di deployed the floating cannon, he could not touch Zhang Yi at all. However, Zhang Yi also knew that this battle had likely attracted much attention. To avoid further exposing his abilities, he decided to end the fight quickly. But he could not use divine power to outright kill Wu Di, as there was no need to kill him. Thus, he opted to switch his bullets to holy silver bullets. Wu Di instinctively tried to block with his light ring ability, but this time, the bullet pierced right through his light ring defense and struck him hard in the chest. Wu Di clutched his chest in pain as the mechanical voice of the arena announced, "Combat over, Wu Di defeated." The sudden end to the battle left Wu Di somewhat dazed. He looked down at the bullet in his palm, utterly astonished. "Just now, this bullet penetrated my defense ring. If it weren't for the training suit's protection, I would definitely have been injured." He couldn't help but shout at Zhang Yi, "Why do you have something like the origin bullet?" Zhang Yi ignored Wu Di, simply smiling lightly. Now that the battle was decided, it also came to an end. He turned and walked away, leaving a final word, "The battle is over. The winner is decided." Deng Shintong, watching Zhang Yi's departing figure, couldn't help but say excitedly, "This kid is really something." Beside him, Liao Honglei also looked thoughtful. Zhang Yi first used regular bullets to make Wu Di lower his guard, then suddenly switched to the origin bullet. Such a tactic was indeed likely to catch someone off guard. It seems Wu Di is still too green. If it had been one of us old hands from the military, such a mistake would never have been made. At this moment, Bai Chunyu also spoke up. However, Wu Di's combat talent is quite impressive. He knows how to use his strengths to target the opponent's weaknesses, which is quite rare. Deng Shintong didn't respond, but instead looked at Zhang Yi with admiration in his eyes, thinking to himself, maybe I should kick Lu Yinghao out of the team and replace him with Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi is much stronger than him. At this time, Zhu Jing in the box also had a fiery expression on his face. He understood that defeating Wu Di indicated that Zhang Yi had the strength of an elite member of the investigative squad. It seems the previous information about Zhang Yi was indeed incorrect. I wonder if Zhang Yi has been hiding his capabilities, or if Bailey Changqing deliberately concealed them. Zhu Jing pondered internally. At this moment, he asked his secretary Lan Xinchen, puzzled, how does he have origin bullets? After a brief analysis, Lan Xinchen said, it's possible that the Black Robe Squad accidentally left a few behind during a mission in Heavenly Sea City. I'll confirm this with Bailey Changqing later. Seeing Zhu Zheng's appreciation for Zhang Yi, Lan Xinchen asked, Commander, should we try to recruit him to Blizzard City and assign him to one of the investigative squads? Zhu Zheng, however, waved his hand and said, no need for now. As far as I know, he is currently the key figure in Heavenly Sea City. With Heavenly Sea City in desperate need of rebuilding and their combat strength diminished, pulling him away might lead to significant issues there. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi arrived at the second floor viewing platform. Bailey Changqing approached and patted Zhang Yi on the shoulder, gratefully saying, thank you for holding back. Zhang Yi nonchalantly replied, just basic decency. To Zhang Yi, Wu Di was insignificant from the start. Then, Zhang Yi asked to collect his winning prize. But first, he needed to change out of his training suit. He thought to himself, I should have bet on this this training suit. Wearing this with my combat suit would be perfect. He looked towards Lu Karen, who confidently nodded at him. Zhang Yi smiled knowingly, aware that the training suit would eventually be his. After changing, Wu Di also came to the changing room. By this time, Wu Di no longer harbored any hostility. It seemed his issues had finally been resolved, and he understood that Zhang Yi had not fought with full strength. If he couldn't even defeat Zhang Yi at partial strength, then he certainly had no business challenging him. Despite some reluctance, he had to accept the outcome. Zhang Yi approached, casually saying, "The match is over. Isn't it time to hand over my spoils of war?" Hearing this, Bailey Changqing called Meng Xiu, who came carrying a large wooden box, and handed it to Zhang Yi. Just as Zhang Yi was about to open the box to admire its contents, Bailey Changqing reached out to stop him. Bailey Changqing whispered a reminder, "Better to check it back home. After all, it's a weapon made from Edmund metal. Better to keep it low-key." Bailey Changqing was planning to use this opportunity to further strengthen the relationship between Zhang Yi and Blizzard City. It seemed that the grudge between Zhang Yi and Wu Di was finally resolved. Bailey Changqing pulled the two aside and said, "Now that the fight is over, let's consider the past grievances settled. I hope you two can be friends from now on." Hearing this, a meaningful smile appeared on Zhang Yi's face. He thought to himself, "My standards for choosing friends are quite high, and Wu Di clearly hasn't met them yet." However, out of respect for Bailey Changqing, and since it was just a courtesy, it was harmless. With that in mind, Zhang Yi extended his hand and said, "Let's look out for each other in the future." Wu Di hesitated for a moment and then somewhat sheepishly extended his hand. Through the battle, he had personally felt the gap between himself and Zhang Yi. Although proud, he also respected the strong. Zhang Yi didn't want to linger on the matter and walked towards the apartment with his companions. Meanwhile, Deng Shintong clearly had intentions of recruiting Zhang Yi. He thought to himself, "This kid hasn't even heard of me." Deng Shintong. After pondering for a while, Deng Shintong said to Bai Chunyu, "Go find Zhang Yi later. Invite him to my place for a meeting. Take him to see the ranking board too. Let him know about my strength." Deng Shintong. On the way back to the apartment, Zhang Yi, having just acquired a superb weapon, couldn't help wanting to check out this treasure. This way, I won't need to share the dragon's roar with Liang Yu anymore. However, Zhang Yi also felt some concern. That battle just now will inevitably attract the attention of the higher-ups. He worried inwardly, "I wonder if my strength has been fully perceived. If Blizzard City insists on keeping me here, that would be troublesome." Just then, a voice called out to him, "Mr. Zhang Yi, please wait." Zhang Yi instinctively turned around, and the person introduced himself. "I am Bai Chunyu from the Heavenly God Squad. I watched your fight with Wu Di and found your tactical thinking and abilities very intriguing. After the gathering ends, our captain would like you to meet him. After all, you're an outsider to Blizzard City and might not fully understand the situation here. It's easy for the unwary to be misled by those with ulterior motives. If I'm not mistaken, Bailey Changqing from the Black Robe Squad has already tried to recruit you into their team, right?" Zhang Yi inwardly sneered, "So they're here to poach me." Seeing Zhang Yi's thoughtful expression, Bai Chunyu felt he had guessed correctly, so he continued, "Since Bian Zheng was deaf, the strength of the Black Robe Squad has declined to the point where it's now the weakest of the 6 major investigation squads, and it might even be disbanded in the future. So I hope you'll choose wisely." Zhang Yi pondered. Deng Shintong clearly intends to recruit me. From what I've gathered, Deng Shintong's status in Blizzard City is even higher than Bian Zhengwu's. I can't afford to offend such a figure. Unfortunately, I have no plans to commit to Blizzard City. Thinking this, Zhang Yi coolly said, "After the meeting, I will visit Mr. Deng Shintong." Bai Chunyu, pleased by this response, smiled and said, "Good, then I'll come find you after the meeting. I'll introduce you to the history and strength of our Heavenly God Squad." With that, Bai Chunyu turned and walked towards the combat center. At this moment, Chun Lei approached anxiously and said, "Boss, you're being targeted now. You're like a dazzling diamond that can't hide its brilliance." Zhang Yi, however, smiled somewhat proudly. "With my current strength, being noticed by them is inevitable. Even before absorbing Yuan Kongya's origin, I had already caught Bian Zhengwu's attention, so avoiding this was really hard. Being too capable is also a trouble." His companions looked worried, thinking to themselves, "If the boss really gets conscripted by Blizzard City, our days are going to be tough." Seeing this, Zhang Yi quickly reassured them, "Don't worry too much. I've discussed it with Bailey Changqing. If I insist on not joining Blizzard City, they shouldn't force me. After all, the investigative squads and the Swallow Cloud Troop require high loyalty, especially for mutants absorbed from outside, and the process is very strict. With the strength I've shown, the high levels of Blizzard City wouldn't shamelessly force recruitment." Relieved by Zhang Yi's words, everyone relaxed. However, Lu Karen's gaze remained fixed on the wooden box. She was even more eager than Zhang Yi to open it and analyze its contents thoroughly. Once back at the apartment, Zhang Yi immediately prepared to open the box, with everyone eagerly watching the large box in his hands, especially Liang Yu and Lu Karen, who were full of anticipation for what was inside the box. But when the box was opened, there was a soft click and a white smoke billowed out. Zhang Yi instinctively stepped back to avoid it, while Lu Karen cautiously said, "This is a special chemical agent used for metal preservation with anti-corrosion properties. Typically, only extremely valuable treasures and weapons are maintained with it." Everyone Everyone leaned in to see, and at first glance, they sensed the extraordinariness of the saber in the box. Liang Yu recognized it instantly and said, "This saber is similar to the tank-style saber. It's not only suitable for close-range defense, but also very convenient to carry." Zhang Yi picked up the saber and played with it for a while. Indeed, it felt exceptional. He smiled, handed the saber to Lu Karen. Lu Karen couldn't help but take the saber and immediately activated her divine mechanism mastery ability to start analyzing the overall material structure. Watching Lu Karen furrow her brows and look serious, Zhang Yi couldn't help but ask, "How is it? Can this metal be replicated?" Lu Karen looked up at everyone and said, "The process of forging this Edmund metal is very complex. It's not just because the material is rare, but the forging technique is extremely strict. Although my divine mechanism mastery can melt Edmund metal, shaping it into such a divine weapon is no easy task." Zhang Yi smiled and reassured, "It's just a cold weapon, no rush. What about that combat suit? How do you see it?" Lu Karen confidently said, "I won't disappoint Big Brother. I'll start working on it as soon as we get back." Then, Liang Yu also took the saber and admired it for a while, exclaiming, "This saber is in no way inferior to my original Dragon's Roar." She raised the saber and suggested, "Let's name the saber Zhang Yi. A treasured saber must have a name to truly match its owner." Zhang Yi took the saber, looked it over carefully, and after a moment of thought, said, "Let's call it Holy Judgment. It cuts through foes as if slicing paper, truly a judgment by the divine." After the spectator event ended, Zhu Zheng's appreciation for Zhang Yi grew. He recalled Bailey Changqing's assessment of Zhang Yi, thinking, "This shield, though not highly loyal, has an excellent defense. The domain definitely has a suitable place for him." At that moment, Lan Xincheng walked in and said softly, "He's here, Commander." Zhu Zheng looked up and said authoritatively, "Let him in." Shortly after, Wu Di entered and immediately saluted militarily, saying, "Commander, I lack strength and did not win against Zhang Yi. Please punish me." It turns out that this was not impulsive or coincidental, but Wu Di was acting on Zhu Zheng's orders. His provocation and fight were all meant to test Zhang Yi's strength. Zhu Zheng smiled slightly and said, "There is nothing to punish. When I arranged for you to provoke Zhang Yi at the bar, I just wanted to test his strength. Now, you have successfully completed the mission. Also, I want to remind you, it's been only 3 months since you awakened and joined the Black Robe Squad. You are very talented. You lost to Zhang Yi because you lack combat experience." At this point, Zhu Zheng's expression became serious. "Nowadays, the strength of the Black Robe Squad has been seriously weakened. I hope you can grow quickly to raise the banner of this team together with Bailey Changqing in the future." Hearing this, Wu Di suddenly felt a surge of responsibility. He clenched his fists tightly, recalling Bian Zhenghua's teachings, and said firmly, "Yes, Commander, I will not disappoint you." The next morning, Zhang Yi was awakened by a series of urgent knocks. Before he could open the door, Xing Tian, Xiao Honglian, and a few buddies had already entered his room, planning to have breakfast and a meeting. After breakfast, Zhang Yi reminded everyone, "Listen everyone, this is Blizzard City. We can dominate in Heavenly Sea City, but here we must follow the rules. This city gathers mutant powers from 12 cities, and a small mishap could trigger a conflict. So, I hope everyone tries not to get into conflicts with others. If something does happen, try to bear with it first, and we can sort it out slowly once we get back." A trace of displeasure crossed Xiao Honglian's face, and she said in a low voice, "If we keep tolerating, others will think we are easy to bully." However, she looked up at Zhang Yi's expression and ultimately held back, thinking silently, "With Zhang Yi in charge in Heavenly Sea City, who dares to treat us like pushovers?" Then, Zhang Yi reassured them again, "We don't seek trouble, but we're not afraid of it either. If someone really dares to mess with us, I'll handle them directly. To me, it's no big deal." Hearing this reassured everyone. Soon after, they arrived at the conference center in Blizzard City. By that time, the venue was already filled with many people. Zhang Yi found a seat in the middle to the back rows and quietly waited for the meeting to start. The notice had stated that the meeting would start at 9:30 a.m., but strangely, it was already 10:30 a.m., and there was still no sign of the Blizzard City high officials. Some people in the venue began to grow restless and started whispering among themselves. However, this was not because Zhu Zheng intended to leave them hanging. There had indeed been a major incident. That very morning, the Minister of United Front, Tu Yunlai, rushed into Zhu Zheng's office to report, "Commander, we sent people to investigate Coastal City and found that 3 of their factions had been completely slaughtered." Zhu Zheng couldn't believe his ears. He frowned and asked, "What? 3 factions?" Although the power in Coastal City isn't top-notch, they altogether had over 5,000 mutants and a population of over 1,000. To wipe them out entirely is not something ordinary people can do. His voice low, he asked, "Have we found out who did it?" Tu Yunlai, full of outrage, said, "We sent some of the best from the Swallow Cloud troop to investigate. Although there were only 4, their combat strength is definitely not weak. However, only one of them came back severely injured." Zhu Zheng's expression changed dramatically, and he asked sternly, "What did the surviving one say?" What came next shocked Zhu Zheng even more. Tu Yunlai said gravely, "According to the survivor, Chen Qi, those people were speaking Hua language." Zhu Zheng turned sharply, his tone fierce. "Are you saying they were from country Fluorescent?" Sun Luxuan's eyes flashed with a cold murderous intent. Now that the world was in chaos, the fact that people from country Fluorescent dared to step onto country Hua's soil was undoubtedly an act of war. Tu Yunlai requested, "Commander, I ask for permission to lead troops there and annihilate them." However, Zhu Jing remained silent, pondering the consequences of this event. The annihilation of a mutant organization in coastal city did not cause him any substantial loss. What was serious was the meaning behind this event. It might signify that people from country Fluorescent had begun eyeing the territory of country Hua again. But Zhu Jing knew that just the power of country Fluorescent alone was not enough to concern him. Using military force could indeed solve the problem, but it might escalate the situation further, especially since country Fluorescent had ties with several other nations. After a moment's thought, Zhu Jing said coldly, "Bring that Qinchi to me. I need to confirm whether this is a major invasion by country Fluorescent or merely some renegade group acting independently." Soon, the severely injured Qinchi was brought before Zhu Jing. Despite his wounds, he stood erect and then reported everything he had witnessed. "As soon as we arrived in coastal city, we saw corpses everywhere with terrible death scenes. Just as we were about to return to report, we encountered a group of people speaking Hua language. Without any conversation, they attacked us. But we only saw 3 people, and only one of them attacked us with a sword. His sword was incredibly fast. We immediately felt the difference in strength. My 3 teammates fought desperately to hold him off, allowing me to escape back here. They created the opportunity for me to return and report." After saying this, Qinchi was crying tears. He clenched his fists, passionately telling Zhu Jing, "We must kill all these scoundrels to avenge our fallen comrades." Zhu Jing propped his chin with both hands, calming Qinchi with a steady tone. "We will definitely not ignore this matter. Go back and heal up. Leave the rest to the region to handle." However, Zhu Jing also had his own considerations. He must first contact the Foreign Affairs Department of the capital region to verify the identities of these people with country Fluorescent's high officials. If they don't acknowledge them, then we'll deal with these guys directly. If they admit these are their people, then it means full-scale war is about to begin. Everyone received the notice to gather at 9:30, but thousands of people had been waiting until 2 in the afternoon. Some were starting to get impatient. Although they respected the strength of the River South domain, they were regional powerhouses themselves and felt disgruntled being left hanging like this. Zhang Yi and his friends didn't mind at all. They took out large fish and meat from their spatial realm and ate heartily. In contrast, the other mutants could only eat the plain box lunches provided by Blizzard City. After eating his fill, Chun Lei loudly belched, which inevitably caused dissatisfaction among the surrounding mutants. A conflict nearly broke out. Seeing this, Zhang Yi quickly retracted all the meal boxes. He checked the time, thinking that since it was unclear when the meeting would actually start, they might as well rest properly. However, the seats here were too hard, and sitting for a long time made everyone uncomfortable. Even though Zhou Qi was massaging him, it didn't much alleviate the fatigue. Xiao Holian was somewhat irritable, murmuring in complaint, "Aren't the regional officials going too far?" Zhang Yi calmly reminded, "Complaining is useless. In the end, only strength matters. This place has gathered mutants from over a dozen cities, and I reckon it won't be long before someone can't hold back. But we must not be the ones to make the first move." Hearing this, Xiao Holian looked around and saw that many were already restless, ready to erupt at any moment. Zhang Yi added, "Pretend the meeting has already started. After all, even if it does, you might not be able to take much in." Just then, seeing Bailey Changqing who had just passed by, Zhang Yi stood up, planning to go out and chat with him to see if he could learn anything useful. However, as soon as he stepped out of the meeting venue, a fully armed guard shouted at him, "What are you doing out here? Get back inside now." Seeing it was Zhang Yi, Bailey Changqing quickly gestured to the guard to relax and walked over to Zhang Yi, pulling him aside and whispering, "There might be some issue up top. The commander can't get away at the moment and is currently handling the situation. Of course, it's not intentional to leave you hanging. Once that matter is resolved, the commander will come over." Hearing this, Zhang Yi nodded in understanding and said, "So, there's been an incident. Then do you know what it is?" Bailey Changqing shook his head and replied, "I really don't know much about it. Our investigative team is just the armed forces. We just need to strictly follow orders, and it's not our place to ask about other matters." Zhang Yi frowned slightly, thinking to himself, all the mutants from 12 cities are gathered here waiting for news. Isn't this matter big enough? What could be so serious? It seems this is no ordinary event. Could it really be that River South domain is about to change? As Zhang Yi lamented the potential upheaval in River South region, he was also filled with concern. With so many mutants gathered in the region right now, if chaos breaks out, no one can remain unaffected. He turned to Bailey Changqing and asked, "If there really is such an important matter to deal with, why not issue a notice and let us wait back at the apartments instead? Why leave everyone hanging here?" Bailey Changqing also appeared quite helpless. "Keeping you here means we have to maintain order, which we don't enjoy either. It's just that I heard the matter was extremely urgent, and the High Command simply had no time to pay attention to this side." He was also full of worries. "I haven't even secured my position as team leader yet. If something goes wrong here, could the Black Robe Squad be disbanded on the spot?" Seeing Bailey Changqing's worried expression, Zhang Yi took a pack of cigarettes from his spatial realm and handed it over. Bailey Changqing's eyes lit up, pleasantly surprised. This is quite the rarity. The cigarette industry has long been shut down. The value of a pack of cigarettes was self-evident. Bailey Chongqing took a deep drag and a look of satisfaction appeared on his face. As they were chatting casually, a disturbance suddenly arose nearby. Bailey Chongqing quickly went to inquire about the situation, only to find out that a fight had broken out. Seeing this, Zhang Yi asked in puzzlement, "They're fighting, and you're not going to intervene?" Bailey Chongqing laughed and explained, "As long as they don't destroy Blizzard City or clash with the residents of Blizzard City, we generally don't intervene." Speaking, he suddenly showed a teasing expression and said, "However, some of those fighting are from your Heavenly Sea City." Hearing this, Zhang Yi's eyes instantly sharpened. He had warned everyone repeatedly not to cause trouble. How could someone be so impulsive? Thinking this, he hurried over. The onlookers were jeering, enjoying the drama and excitedly shouting, "Beat him hard! Kill him!" Zhang Yi squeezed through the crowd and saw that it was Chen Jingwan fighting fiercely with Sun Jianming from Days City. His brow furrowed immediately. Chen Jingwan was always steady. How could he be fighting with Sun Jianming? The two had a history of grievances. When Wei Dinghai was still alive, he frequently suppressed Sun Jianming. Now, it seems Sun Jianming seized the opportunity to kick someone when they're down since hearing of Wei Dinghai's death. Bailey Chongqing frowned and asked, "What caused them to start fighting?" A guard replied, "They requested a duel themselves, so of course, we had no reason to refuse." Zhang Yi glanced at Sun Jianming, whose abilities seemed special, likely a strength-type mutant. His arms were swollen, huge like a gorilla's. Sun Jianming was shouting loudly, "Wei Dinghai was at least worthy of fighting me. But who are you, Chen Jingwan? You Chen Jingwan are nothing, not even worthy to fight me." Hearing Sun Jianming mention his deceased superior, Wei Dinghai, Chen Jingwan became furious, and the two quickly grappled with each other. Chen Jingwan tried to use his agile body to entangle Sun Jianming, but Sun Jianming, unfazed, shouted, "Using that move against me? That's suicidal." Sun Jianming grabbed Chen Jingwan, stretching his body like pulling noodles. Chen Jingwan couldn't break free and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The surrounding crowd cheered for Sun Jianming. The mutants from Heavenly Sea City are so weak. They say he's a leader of a faction, managing the important morning dew base at Heavenly Sea City's port, and this is his strength? It seems like there really are no strong people left in Heavenly Sea City now. Many eyes began to look at Heavenly Sea City with a different light, given its reputation as a wealthy place. Xing Tian, itching to help as he watched, was held back by Xiao Honglian. "Let's see what Zhang Yi decides first. He's right over there." The two approached Zhang Yi to ask if he needed to step in, but Zhang Yi simply smiled faintly, paying them no mind. Bailey Chongqing, on the other hand, was worried, thinking Zhang Yi might explode in anger and kill everyone here. With this thought, he couldn't help but speak up. "Zhang Yi, should I step in to stop them? It might not be appropriate for you to intervene," Bailey Chongqing tentatively offered. To his surprise, Zhang Yi flatly declined. "There's no need. Everyone's been waiting for the meeting for so long. Let them have some entertainment. I won't trouble you." Zhang Yi chuckled coldly and added, "As for those who think Heavenly Sea City is weak and want to plunder our resources, I should be able to claim self-defense, right?" A chill flickered in his eyes. Chen Jingwan had disregarded warnings and challenged Sun Jianming, violating his orders. Zhang Yi thought this might be a good opportunity to teach him a lesson. With that, Zhang Yi uninterestedly turned back towards the meeting venue. By now, Chen Jingwan was barely clinging to life, prompting Bailey Chongqing, after some thought, to order the Swallow Cloud Guards to intervene and stop Sun Jianming's one-sided beating under the guise of preventing a fatality. After Zhang Yi entered the meeting hall, the disdain for Heavenly Sea City grew even more pronounced, filled with mockery and scorn. Some even boldly proclaimed, "Let's find an opportunity to divide up Heavenly Sea City once we're back." As Liang Yu returned to his seat, he worriedly said, "Heavenly Sea City is going to be turbulent again. Chen Jingwan's defeat makes us seem utterly weak." Chun Lei, also concerned, asked, "Boss, can we even survive long enough to get back to Heavenly Sea City?" Zhang Yi laughed and patted Chun Lei on the shoulder, reassuring him, "Do you think Blizzard City would let them cause chaos? Don't worry. If anyone dares to stir trouble, I'll make sure they learn that Heavenly Sea City still has its strong defenders." Hearing this, Chun Lei finally relaxed a bit. Soon after, Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian returned, followed by a battered Chen Jingwan. Thankfully, Sun Jianming hadn't dared to go too far here, but the sight of Chen Jingwan's condition was still shocking. Xiao Honglian suggested, "Let Zhou Qir treat him. Don't delay any further." But Zhang Yi coldly refused. He chose to fight that battle. He must bear the consequences of losing. Chen Jingwan, head bowed, felt he was in the wrong, but still couldn't help but argue with Zhang Yi. "I didn't want to fight, but they were too provocative. I was just talking with friends when he started mocking me. With so many city powers watching, I couldn't let them look down on us." Heavenly Sea City. Hearing this, Zhang Yi looked up at him and said indifferently, "So now, have you made Heavenly Sea City proud?"